Motion posters. I think motion posters are really good for graphic designers to think about early as they're learning about motion graphics because it asks them to think about motion as communication. And this is one of the ways that motion graphics differs from animation as an art form is the use of time as a design element just like we use things like scale, alignment, or proximity. So, to understand its value, it can be helpful to compare the same communication while it's static versus while it's moving. And one way that we can do that is by designing motion posters along with a static version of them. So, a lot of the things I'm going to be bringing up here come from Josh Schwab, who is an excellent designer who has done some writing on moving posters, as he calls them. So, these sort of frameworks and terms come from his manifesto on moving posters. And this site is an excellent source of inspiration of them. So, the categories that Josh presents are three. The first one is static, which means there are no position changes on the poster. Essentially, the entirety of the poster contents can change over time as a sequence of images, or the colors may change, but the composition stays the same. These are examples of static motion posters. On the left, you see there is some subtle rotation, and then the image in the center and the colors change, but the composition is overall the same. On the right, we have much smaller animations happening on the number 5, but again, the layout is the same. You can imagine what both of these posters look like as static posters. Next, and this is, I think, the broadest category that designers will look at and create, which is dynamic motion posters. These posters demonstrate a single central movement or many smaller divided movements, and the content changes significantly throughout that. This happens through pushing, rotating, reconfiguring, so on and so forth. So, in these, you can see how the composition is changing throughout the animation. On the left, the visual weight of that 5 in the background is pulling the eye around the canvas. And then on the right, the shape is changing quite significantly, and the placement of the information is changing significantly. Finally, we have filmic posters. These are moving posters that focus on the use of film or video in them. This sort of acknowledges that these motion posters exist along a spectrum from motion graphics to cinema or film. So these are examples of filmic motion posters. On the left, you can see that there is a graphic composition in the foreground, but there is a video collage in the background. On the right, there is this video of these pigeons pecking at the ground that are masked or green screened out so that the design is showing through. Some principles that Josh gives for designing good motion posters. Number one, use reinforcement. This means that any movement that you add to your animation should be reinforcing the message of the poster. It shouldn't be this extra decoration that's put on top of it, but again, it's used as a design element to communicate something very specific. So in this example on the left, you see this poster uses the word reflection, and then the movement in the animation has this sort of repeated and refracted over and over as if it is being looked at through a series of mirrors. On the right, you can see that the bottle is functioning as a lighthouse, and then the motion reinforces that by animating it such that it looks like that light is spinning. Next are to use variations. I like to call this enhancement. This means that the motion in your poster should amplify the message of your static poster in a way that's not possible to do with a static layout. So, for example, the poster on the left here is sort of mocking a travel poster by showing a lot of traffic that blocks the scenery of this mountain. What the movement does here is it builds on top of that message of a busy road by also showing that this traffic is like bumper to bumper and moves very slowly and it's very claustrophobic. So the movement here not only reinforces that idea that it's a busy road, but it also enhances it by showing you the speed that things are moving at and the stop and go nature of the vehicles. On the right, these compositions in this dynamic poster show this collection of ephemera, some very different abstract objects collected together. And any one of these compositions looks nice, but what the motion does here is it builds on top of that idea of that collection of ephemera by giving new compositions that have even more ephemera in them. So, sort of enhancing the randomness of those collection of objects. Third is to make sure you're considering readability. This means that the entire message has to be readable in a static version of that poster, and that in motion, that readability can be challenged, but the viewer has to be guided over time to get through and to make sure they're taking the message away. So on the left here, this isn't in English, but you can see that various design elements are covering up the text throughout the animation, but they always shift off or the words shift over so that they're visible over a short period of time. Same thing on the right, the designer is using the edge of the canvas to activate that space and it cuts off the words. The text is repeated down below as if it's wrapping around. This is something we do with static layouts all the time. But then the use of motion also moves things into view so that it's clearer to read at some point. Finally, there is accessibility. And this is the idea that the viewer should be able to quickly grasp the entire communication in the motion poster. Ideally, it shouldn't matter when a viewer starts or stops watching it. They should always be able to take the whole message away. For this reason, it's often discouraged to do these assembly and disassembly posters where it is built up over time with a start and an end. In these examples here, you can see how the composition is rearranging and the motion is active, it's interesting, but the viewer can always take away the whole message by jumping in at any point. We're not really sure where these animations start or end. The final note is that it's important to remember that motion really dominates our attention. I personally think it's the only thing that's more powerful than color in capturing attention. And so we have to employ it mindfully in practice. That means that we have to follow these principles so that it's reinforcing our message rather than distracting from it.